Hello. Recently, a user contacted me with a very interesting question. The user has a Polyend Synth and a Polyend Play Plus, I think, and they were curious if you could use these two devices for live performances, as in improvise on the fly, record tracks with the synth onto the play, and build up an entire track this way. I'm not sure what they're trying to achieve, whether they're trying to build from scratch or if they want to have prepared parts on the play and just add to those as they go along. Doesn't really matter. The issue that they were facing was they were running into a MIDI loop back, not a Libby moved back. MIDI loop back issues, and that prevented them from syncing and sequencing things properly. So as I tend to go down rabbit holes when I hear questions like that, and I want to find out for myself. And here we are. This is what I've learned. I hope this can be useful for someone. So right now, the synth and the play are connected via MIDI with each other. MIDI out of the play goes into the MIDI in of the synth. Synth MIDI out goes into the MIDI in of the play, or Play Plus in this case. And I haven't set up MIDI on the devices, so let's do that right from the start. First things first, I have two synth engines here, a bass, some pad type of thing. I'm not even sure if I'm going to use this or not, but this is useful for showcasing something. And the third engine is actually a MIDI engine, which was introduced in firmware 1.03, together also with pad mapping, which we're going to have a look at as well. For pad mapping, I made a separate video. I may go into more detail here as well. For those interested in what pad mapping is, I'll link to that video in the description of this video. On the play side, I have a simple sample, which is going to help me to stay intact in beat. That sounds something like this. And on the MIDI side, I have a perc engine and two other synths that I might use or may not use. We'll see. We'll see where this goes. I'm doing this on the fly. I'm going to try not to cut too many things here, and I'll probably leave in some mistakes, and that's how it is. So let's set up, this is not synth, well, yes, let's set up synth, but the MIDI part of synth first, which is really simple. Go into the MIDI settings, and we want the play to be actually the clock, so MIDI in jack, so we get clock from the play. I'm going to enable transport in as well, but in this case I don't think it matters, because I'm not going to have anything particular that needs transport in. And that is that. As you may have noticed, the blue engine, the first engine, which has one voice, is assigned to jack 1. The leady, paddy kind of engine is on jack 2 and has 3 voices, and the MIDI engine is on jack 16. More on that in a little bit with one voice. Now, on the play, we're going to make sure that the clock is internal. Transport in doesn't matter right now. Clock out, we want to send via jack. Transport out, we want to send via jack. And in order for us to sequence or play parts from here into here, we must enable notes in, also MIDI in jack. And with that, I should already be able, if I choose jack 1, go into the little keyboard here. Yes, we are already sending MIDI, in this case, to jack 1, which is the bass sound. So everything works as it should. Good. Now, I think it's important to explain how MIDI exactly works on the synth, because there are different ways that the synth can send out MIDI information. And that can lead to the issue that the user had, with loopbacks or wrong data being recorded. Now, you may have noticed in MIDI settings, Note in channel is in Omni mode, which means it's going to listen for every single channel that it receives. Which means that right now, as it's set up, since the synth will send MIDI out for every pad that you press, if I have this set up to be the perk engine, oops, let's go here, the perk engine. If I press this button here, you can already hear it. It is playing perk as well at the same time, which is probably not what you want. And that's one of the reasons, there's actually more reasons, why you want to probably use a dedicated MIDI channel. And let's see if I can give you a good example as to what the other reasons are. First of all, let me explain the couple MIDI modes that we have on the synths, and I'm just gonna point the play to a channel that is currently not occupied, like channel 3, for example. And I'm just gonna start live recording. And I'm gonna select a couple tracks to see how much data I'm receiving. So in this case, if I'm sending out the bass track, which is one voice, and in the grid mode, it is set to note. That means if I press one note, it should actually just send, as it says, one note. So if I press this, you see it actually sends that one note. We're not going to have any playback because it's set to jack channel 3, which is good, so we don't get too much noise right now. This works as expected. Even if I were to change this one now to jack 1, it plays correctly. And if I will go back to record mode, oops, I was on jack channel 3 there. That's another thing to keep an eye out. Because when I entered live rec, this was still set to jack channel 3, so it recorded jack channel 3. So you have to make sure you're always on the right device when you're trying to send data. As you see, it's still on jack channel 3, and this is another interesting bit that you need to be aware of. Once you're in live rec, any changes that you make up here will not reflect correctly unless you do it right on the step that you need it to be different. Which is actually pretty hard to do. So it's best when trying to live record things to actually get out of live rec, choose the right channel, in this case jack channel 2, and I'm going to record something here. Which could have been played better, but you get the point. All right, that's when your mode is set to note. Now here's where the problems will arise. Let's say we take our pad. Right now it is in note mode, which means it's just one note that is being played. If I would like to use chords modes, or a chord pack in this case, which will send out multiple notes. If I would record this, let's make sure we are on the right device. We're on jack channel 2, that's good. So if I record this, by pressing one button, oops, which I didn't mean to press right now, you see that I've sent out 3 MIDI notes, which is great because that means with a single press I can record all the necessary notes from MIDI. That allows me to record the chord. But it also uses up 3 tracks on the play, as you have noticed. Now, since firmware 1.03, we have something called pad mapping. And you can find pad mapping under Synth, More, pad mapping. And pad mapping allows you to send one key or one note which plays the pads. So it's not MIDI, well, it is MIDI, but it's not just sending a single note. It actually maps it to the pad and will act as if you were physically pressing the pad. I know that sounds confusing, but what that does is this mess. And that's where the loop comes into play. Here's where the loop becomes an issue, because note in channel is on Omni. I'm sending based on this synth on jack 2. So what happens is my note is being sent in here, but the default behavior is that it sends the free notes of the chord, right? So it receives it here. Free notes are triggered or should be stored here. And then all free notes are sent back into the synth. And because it's in pad mapping, it tries to map it to 3 different pads. So you're starting to accumulate a lot of more notes, and that ends up with this crazy mess. If I press this button, that shows it quite nicely. Did you see what happened here? It just goes nuts. And that is why I think the best thing you can do is assign a dedicated channel, in my case, channel 16, and assign that to the MIDI engine over here. What that should do now, if I'm sending still to jack 2, which is fine, is if I press, let's say, this note, it prevents the loop, as you have noticed. And that is really helpful if you want to play with these. But as I mentioned, this is only something that is useful or that is necessary if you're using a specific mode. But ideally, you always work with this dedicated engine, then you don't ever run into any other of those issues. All right, now that we've taken care of this, the other nice thing with pad mapping is if I were to go back and say I want to record a chord, what happens is it only uses one note. So thereby you're freeing up multiple tracks and you can play chords. This allows you to record more data and thereby is far more useful this way. So that's the benefit for having to do all of this setup, but this is really beneficial. Another thing to keep in mind is your root note defines what is played over here. You notice how my actual pad over here is lower than over here. That's because my root is currently higher. So if I set this to C1, it is correct or mapped correctly to this. So always keep an eye out what your root note is for the MIDI engine. You can use the MIDI engine as long as you want, of course, but ideally you would start building your tracks with the MIDI engine, and at some point you can leave the MIDI engine and actually use this with a separate engine if you really would want to. Now, I think that covers all of that. Let's go to sequencing actually something on the play. And there's another thing that I want to highlight here, another issue that you might encounter. And for that, I'm not going to have to play anything. It's enough that I have this running. As you know, the individual tracks can be in different you can have different track lengths and you can have different track speeds. Now, this is cool, but if you're trying to sequence live, this can also cause issues. Let's say you want to have something half speed. This may work quite nicely, but if you're eventually trying, or were wrong and trying to get back to the original speed, you see how they're now out of sync. I mean, this could be wanted behavior, but maybe it's not. There is currently no easy way of syncing these two back up. The one thing that you can attempt is setting the track length to 1, and once it comes around, double pressing the button next to track length in order to try and sync them up. But I think on camera you can see this better than me here with my own eyes. You see how it's not really in sync? Yeah. So trying to sync them back up is going to be really tough. So my suggestion to you is to actually set your tracks to the track lengths and to the track speeds that you would like to have. Now, for this demonstration, I have decided I'm going to have this track as 1/8 with a track length of 32, but actually I'm going to start with 16 because changing the track length to make it longer is usually easier to change on the fly than if you need to shorten it down. And the other track here I'm going to have at 1/4, and the track length is going to be 64. That one can already be there. All right, so I think I have everything set up the way I want it. I want track channel 1 first, because I would like to put a bass down first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pressing play. As you see, these have different speeds now. And my idea is I had this piece here that will allow me to play something in the right tempo. And here's one of the mistakes that I already made. Don't forget to go into Live Rec, and don't forget to actually select the track where you want to record something. So once we get around, I can record. And here's another nice one. Did you notice what happened? Let me play this for you. You remember, I played this note and it's not recorded. You have to make sure that you have individual presses in between so that it can actually register those properly. I don't know if there's a setting to change this. If somebody knows, please let me know, because I didn't find this. All right, let's try this again. All right, there we go. That was fun. I made mistakes, but it was fun. And I hope this serves as an inspiration for others. And yeah, I hope that helps. Have fun. Bye.